check in on my Haitian followers real quick. Because as a Black American, I don't find the dehumanization of minority groups to be funny. Trump going on national TV to tell Americans that Haitian immigrants are eating their pets is terroristic. It is done for the purpose of A, making us view them as subhuman, B, making us distrust them, and C, inviting violence against them, violence that is already unfolding, by the way. I'm from Ohio, and it's actually happening. No, it's not, Boo Boo the Fool. You've fallen for racist propaganda. Haitian people are not visibly distinguishable from other Black people. Illegal Haitian immigrants are not visibly distinguishable from Haitian Americans. So for all the people that are allegedly eating cats and dogs, please explain to me how you can tell that they are Haitian immigrants specifically, especially when there are no police reports to be found about these incidents. There is one body cam video being circulated as proof. That is of a woman who was alleged to have consumed a cat. That woman was American and going through psychosis. Y'all haven't noticed that the government keeps giving you imaginary adversaries so you don't realize that they're the real ones? We have been conditioned to view immigrants as interlopers, as outsiders, as people that we have to battle for safety and resources. We're told to believe that if we simply keep these people out, that all of our problems as American citizens will simply go away. Meanwhile, the U.S. is one of the countries that drained Haiti of its resources and its money, making it economically unstable, which drives a lot of them to come here in the first place. You're worried about immigrants stealing your jobs? Baby, that job doesn't even pay you enough to thrive in the country that you were born in. You're worried about being endangered by immigrants while being scared to send your children to school because of domestic terrorism by the same demographic that is asking you to be scared of immigrants. They're getting all this government assistance while Americans starve. There is more than enough money to provide for American citizens, to shelter the homeless, to raise minimum wage, to pay for health care. But instead, our government invests billions in the cops that shoot us in our homes and the weapons that are used to commit genocide. And while y'all battle displaced people for crumbs, the politicians eat well, baby, and I ain't talking about no fucking pets.
Watching Daya rush to break up with Cordell before he got a chance to say anything was so embarrassing. Like, I hate having secondhand embarrassment. Like, bitch, I pay for Peacock. I pay to watch this. Don't you ever make me feel embarrassed in my own home.
I'll be the one to say it. Men don't have hobbies anymore, and that's why they're not as sexy. That dance you just watched, that JT Cumming dance wasn't weirdly hot. It was hot. Because it's hot when a man has a hobby and when he's passionate about something in life other than making your life horrible. But you didn't hear that from me. Toodles.
Men, you're not gonna like hearing this, so I'm gonna hold your hand when I say this. If you have not assaulted a woman, either sexually or physically, if you have not hurt a woman, hit a woman, abused a woman, catcalled a woman, groped a woman, if you just generally respect women, you are not a good guy. Okay? You're not a great guy. You're also not a bad guy. You are a normal man. The men who do those things are not normal men. They are bad men. You are not special because you don't do those things. You might be special, but not because you don't do those things. Do you understand? I'm just tired of the standard being in Hell's Basement, so let's just lift that a little bit, okay? I'm so glad we had this talk.
It's pretty easy to tell from what I wrote in my video, but I'm against sex work as an industry, not sex workers as people. And if you're against sex workers, the actual women, you're most likely a misogynist. And when you mentioned in this comment that it's not done for fun and women do it to pay their bills, it's okay, yeah, that's literally another reason why sex work is awful and very anti-feminist and the worst industry ever. Because the women that are in these situations where they need it to pay their bills and this industry is what they rely on, those are usually the women that don't have the freedoms or the rights to choose what they pursue. Or accessibility into any other career path. But there is an entire separate conversation about women who do have accessibility into other career paths and women who don't have to be in sex work, and that's a choice for them. That isn't feminist. But yeah, I was critiquing sex work as an industry, not the people, because I'm not an idiot.
You know who was the real bad guy in Despicable Me? Dr. Nefario, the backstabbing little bitch. What a prick, by the way. What a twat. Number one, you abandon your best friend of years, Gru, not once but twice, and then you have the audacity to call the orphanage lady on Gru and get his literal children taken away from him. What an arsehole. The song Traitor by Olivia Rodrigo was written about you, buddy. And then you have the cheek to say to Gru, I've been offered a different form of employment. Mate, you're like 107 and you've made 64 weapons wrong. You made a fucking fart gun and Gru still didn't make you feel bad about it or get angry at you, and now you have the audacity to fuck off because he's not evil enough for you anymore. And then to top it all off, his big redemption arc, the big way we all fucking forgive him, is by fixing a problem that he caused. If he didn't call the orphanage lady on Gru, then the kids would still be with Gru and they wouldn't have gone missing and he wouldn't have to save them. If I was Gru, I would have been like, no, you've made your bed, now you can fucking go and lie in it, you old shit. Retire, you and your fart gun can piss off. There is no job for you here anymore. I'm already taking interviews for your fucking replacement, and I'm going to choose someone who's loyal and kind and nice, and you are not that, sir. You put the V in villain, now piss off. That's what I would say. Rude. What a rude man.
I hate the argument of, oh, he was just a product of his time, because it implies that no one was thinking differently at that time, right? That no one at the time was more progressive, that was the universally held opinion. But that's very rarely true. Like the classic example is someone will say, oh, it was really bad that the founding fathers owned enslaved people. And some moron will say, well, that was just the time period. That's just what everyone did back then. No, that's what some people did back then. There were literally founding fathers who were abolitionists. So there were even founding fathers like Ben Franklin who owned slaves and then became abolitionists. So clearly it was possible to both not be pro-slavery at that time and also to change your opinion on slavery at that time. Those were both clearly possible things that you could do, and some people like Thomas Jefferson or Washington chose not to do that, making them wrong for that. Maybe not when an issue is first happening, but by the time it gets debated in the public sphere, there is always one group history will look favorably upon, if it's a binary issue, right? If it's for example, should women vote, right? Yes, no. If you said no in the 1910s, you look like an ass right now. If you said yes, you look fine, right? Now, no one was discussing it in the 1770s, so we can't really hold that against them in the same way. I get that. But by the time it was being debated, if you were on the wrong side of an active debate, you should be held accountable from a historical lens for being on the wrong side of that debate. Like, of course, it would be unreasonable to apply modern day standards of what racism looks like to George Washington, right? But we could apply 1770s standards of what racism looks like, and there were people in the 1770s very clearly saying slavery is racist, and he was saying, no, I don't think so. Don't really care. So even for the 1770s, like, that's the problem, is that argument is applied wrong. Like, a product of their time would imply that that was the only opinion they could have had at the time. And some opinions were the only acceptable opinion. But most of the time, that's not when people bring up this argument. They bring it up when there was actually a live debate happening with two sides that were both acceptable in society. And one of them is no longer acceptable. And I think there's a place to look at things in their historical context and to look at them with a modern view. I think those are both valid ways to look at history. I think you can say George Washington was racist and also say he was racist for his time, right? You can say John Adams was racist, but maybe not so racist for his time, right? But he was still fucking racist, right? So you can do that. They're two separate lenses to look at things with. But it doesn't excuse them, right? You can't excuse somebody simply because other people thought the same thing back then. Unless literally everyone thought that way. And even then, you should still take it into your mind that it was wrong. So, I don't know. I just hate, it's so disingenuous and so badly applied when people are like, it was a product of his time. He was against the civil rights movement, but that was just the time. No, the civil rights movement was fucking happening. So clearly people at that time were pro-civil rights, and this guy was not. What do you mean he was a product of his time? When was his time? I don't know. So fucking stupid.
Hardest pill I've had to swallow as a black lesbian living in New York City is that some queer people just don't like women. Like at my first apartment in New York, I lived with 3 femme queer women, and our neighbors were also all queer, but like gender non-conforming or trans-masc. And they called us the gay straight girls for a year because they heard us listening to Harry Styles. When our lease was ending, they invited us to a party at their place, and we went to stir the pot. Someone started asking us, are we in school? And we were like, yeah. And then they went on like a 10-minute monologue about how college is a capitalist institution. And I was like, yeah, I know. I didn't say I liked it. Like, I was like, I get what's going on here. Like, you think we're vapid. You think we're not with the movement. But they weren't really recognizing, like, you're a white person who moved here to follow your dreams, and I am a first-generation American. Like, and then we invited them to a party at our apartment, and they spent the entire party shit-talking us. Like, not even talking to us, just talking shit about us in our apartment. Calling my roommate a bitch. They said that I was, like, aggressively friendly. I'm just a Libra. Sorry. But, like, even now, I'll go out with my girlfriend. I'll see people I am acquainted with, people I recognize and who know me, and they'll only address her in conversation, even though they don't know her. Like, or like even with my ex who was trans-masc, like, we stayed friends after the breakup. That was the first mistake. But suddenly in conflict, they're comfortable calling me a bitch. Suddenly they're treating me like I'm nagging them for setting valid boundaries. And I feel like it's always the people who purport themselves to be like super radical and like don't see femininity as like inherently radical. And obviously, the thing that's super frustrating about this is that I am black, you guys. Like, so to feel like I'm so brazenly being judged for my femininity is actually super traumatizing. Because believe it or not, these 26-inch knotless braids don't grow out of my head naturally, and they're not free. Believe it or not, I don't walk into every CVS and immediately find my shade. Like, femininity is not just given to black women. It's something that I've earned and something that I feel is very radical, in my opinion. I also recognize that women, lesbians, and bisexuals included, can be and are harmful to trans-masc and gender non-conforming people. And caution based on lived experience is valid. But I do think that's a feeling that should be investigated so it doesn't turn into a harmful, unchecked bias. Like, people will immediately treat me like I'm stupid or like I'm disinteresting or like I'm vapid because I'm wearing like a skirt. And it's just getting so annoying. It's getting so annoying. I hate it.
Anytime I hear people complaining about forced diversity and how the younger generations are too sensitive and how the older generations aren't bigoted, they just don't know any better, I think about that one episode of Boy Meets World where Sean dresses up as a girl and goes on a date with a guy to prove that not all guys are shallow, except he ends up proving that they kind of are. This whole thing starts with Sean gets into an argument with a girl who's talking about how guys don't care about meaningful connections and how they only want one thing, and Sean disagrees with that. He says, not all guys are like that, but even if they are, how are we supposed to know we're being inappropriate? So she says to him, we'll tell you when you're being inappropriate, guys are just too busy planning their next move to hear us say no. Sean wants to prove her wrong, and he decides the way to do this is to dress up as a girl and go on a date with a guy, because that's the only way to really understand her perspective. And no, this isn't supposed to be like a joke. Everybody's taking this seriously because they actually want to learn something from it. Corey even offers to carry Sean's books for him because he's kind of a cute girl. And when Mr. Feeney, their teacher, sees him in the hallway, he pulls him aside and is like, hey, if you ever need to talk about anything, I'm here for you because I'm not here to judge. Then later, Sean goes on a date with the guy, and the guy he goes on a date with doesn't really care what he has to say, doesn't respect his boundaries, and keeps invading his personal space even though he keeps telling him to stop, and he realizes that girl was kind of right. And for the record, Boy Meets World came out in 1993, over 30 years ago, so I don't want to hear shit from anyone.
Oh, you want to give the Palestinians their land back? What's next? Giving the land back to the Native Americans? Yeah. Yeah, actually. That would be terrific. Oh, you want to give everyone free healthcare? What's next? Free houses? Yes. Yeah, free housing would be awesome. Free public housing would be great. Oh, you want to offer Puerto Rico independence? What, you going to offer Hawaii independence too? Sure. Yeah, if they want it, yeah. Yeah. Like, these ideas are not radical. These are normal fucking ideas. And I hate how far right the window is. That we all that people will just accept some ideas are just beyond achievability. Like, somehow we've accepted in a lot of parts of society that, like, reparations for black people are just not doable. They're very doable. Like, they are so doable and so necessary and justified. And, like, we all just kind of, in politics, the political world has been like, well, but maybe not. What is up with that? Why is the window so fucking far to the right? It's insane to me. It's fucking insane. Like, Bernie talks about a lot, like how a lot of these ideas are not radical and they're framed as radical, but they're not. But he's right. Like, they're literally not crazy. They're not radical. They're not far left. These are, like, normal fucking ideas that just basic humans with empathy should understand. I don't know. It just pisses me the fuck off to have to argue it, like, as a leftist. No, not as a leftist, as a fucking human, dude. As someone who cares about people, I believe this. Regardless of my leftist tendencies, I care about people. You know? Like, I don't know.
I have a genuine question for the Conrad Collective, because I know you're still all hung up on the firework and the false god kiss. Like, you guys are still making videos about that one and how it gags you, how much you guys love it, because I know you guys love this scene. And you guys love to dig into symbolism. Like, you guys pride yourselves on that and how the show is all set up for Belly and Conrad. Do you guys think that the song False God by Taylor Swift reflects well on Belly and Conrad's relationship, or on Conrad as a love interest? Thinking it's sexy, sure, but you guys are always telling me about symbolism and how I'm stupid. What about That's the Way I Loved You? Is it a bop? Sure, but do you guys, like, in good faith, do you think that reflects well on Conrad as a love interest or on their relationship? Or, since we're here, how about Exile? I gotta know genuinely, like, what is your symbolic, cinematic, I am so educated on film and literature and the use of songs and symbolism in TV shows? Because you guys will literally take the smallest, most obscure thing and use it to prove how Jeremiah is a manipulative narcissist, border collie, or whatever. But what's the interpretation for false god in use for Conrad? Or That's the Way I Loved You? Or Exile? Actually, I can see what you guys might say for Exile, and I have to, but really, word on the street is that Belly and Jeremiah are together in Paris, and by word on the street, I mean there is video evidence of them filming together there, and I just watched it. Thank you to all 15 of you who sent it to me, and especially to Mina for always being on the front line and sending it first. I have to say, I have a great feeling about this. I was very happy to see that. They did talk about going there in the books, and before any one of you says, well, they were filming Conrad scenes too, like I just said on the picturegram, one of these days you guys are going to come to understand that I don't give a fliggity flying about Bonrad. Put this up for just 1 second. I reposted the video. Like, they hug. A few of you expressed concern to me that Belly seems to be looking kind of like conflicted or like surprised, and they sort of have like different vibes in this scene, and I think that's a good thing. You guys know I tend to be pretty pessimistic about the fate of Jeremiah and the fate of season 3, but I actually have a pretty good feeling about this. Not like jelly endgame good feeling, but I don't know. I really liked it. Belly and Jeremiah reunited in Paris. Sounds like a good time.
If this film is so brilliant and feminist as people say it is, then why is there so much female nudity? Why is there so much blatant objectification of the female body? It's because the irony is the point. And we can talk all day about the actual efficacy of satire, or at what point depiction actually becomes endorsement or romanticization, but I, for one, am personally thrilled that this subject matter has finally been addressed in film with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Because existing as a woman is a prison. Period. End of sentence. In every lifetime. And one of my favorite things about The Substance is the fact that even the fantasy version of yourself, the best possible life you could ever live as a woman, is completely and utterly dehumanizing. I've only seen this film once so far, and I cannot wait to see it again, but I walked out of this film, which was an incredibly upsetting and disturbing and disorienting experience, thinking that this might just be one of my new favorite films of all time. That's obviously for a lot of reasons. Like, this movie is incredibly well made on every single level, and if Demi Moore does not get nominated for an Academy Award for this, I will personally take to the streets. But it's really because this film has such a brutal and unflinching approach to a core truth that no one wants to acknowledge, that the beauty that we all admire so much is inseparable from the horrors of trying to reach it. It made me think of one of my favorite quotes of all time from incredible film scholar Molly Haskell, who wrote the book that is also incredible, From Reverence to Rape, The Treatment of Women in the Movies. And the quote is this: "The big lie perpetrated on Western society is the idea of women's inferiority, a lie so deeply ingrained in our social behavior that to merely recognize it is to risk unraveling the entire fabric of civilization." When I first read that line, it's the opening line to that book, it like shook me to my core. And I think it's because when we confront these like really dark truths that no one wants to talk about, it is deeply uncomfortable. And I think that that is exactly what this film does in the way that it approaches the self-hatred we have as women, the way that we are conditioned to believe that we can never, ever be good enough. And it's because we can't from a societal standpoint. We truly never can reach the standards that they are trying to set for us. And I honestly don't know if I'll ever be able to get over the brilliance of how effective this film is at conveying its true message, because satire is notoriously easy to misinterpret. And there is a gratuitous amount of female nudity and the depiction of exactly the kinds of things that this film is being critical of, but the point is so razor sharp that it is impossible to miss. I'm honestly just completely amazed and blown away and in love with this movie. I think it's one of the most poignant and relevant commentaries on modern feminism that I've frankly ever seen. Like, yes, I obviously love the commentary about what it's like to age as a woman and the way society increasingly sees us as irrelevant and frankly invisible, but I also think equally as important is the conversation happening in this movie about the way that the tools that we are given for our so-called empowerment just further dehumanize and objectify us and force us to participate in the incredible cruel irony of subjugating ourselves further in order to feel momentary empowerment. The perpetual cycle of self-hatred and self-destruction, because it's easier for us to internalize all of our greatest fears that maybe we truly are disgusting, instead of tackling the much harder and much bigger truth that maybe society is just fundamentally broken and refuses to accept women as just full and complete people. Is really fucking hard. And I think that this movie illustrates how easy it is to turn that into a me problem instead of a society problem. I think another thing that this movie brilliantly conveys is that the cruelty of that is the point. I fucking love this movie. Yes, it is as disturbing as you have heard. It's fucked up. If you're not comfortable with body horror, you might fucking hate this, but it's incredible. It's honestly incredible. I was literally just bitching about how there's not nearly enough depictions of contemporary adulthood in modern media, let alone in love stories. And here comes Netflix to say, oh, really, bitch? How about a contemporary love story between people in their 40s? And cherry on top, Adam Brody's gonna play the hottest rabbi you've ever seen. And I genuinely think with rom-coms, when you get two incredibly charismatic leads like Kristen Bell and Adam Brody, it's kind of on autopilot. You don't have to do much more. But what I love about this show is that the supporting cast is fucking awesome. Like, I would have watched simply for Timothy Simmons because I'm a huge Veep fan. He's amazing in it. He's a standout. Justine Loop, who I absolutely loved in Succession. Jackie Tohn, who was in Glow, Justice for Glow. Sherry Cola, who was in Joyride last year. They're all amazing. And I do genuinely think that the show is very cute. It's very sweet. It's very entertaining. I binged it in a weekend. I do have some criticisms, though, because of course I fucking do. It's me. What were you expecting? That I was not gonna have criticisms? My main issue of the show is the pacing. I feel like because the show is so tropey and it's very heavily relying on the audience having an understanding of the way these stories are normally told, that it would have really benefited from like a 22 episode traditional sitcom kind of setup, which I understand is kind of like a thing of the past, unfortunately. Like, it's actually kind of depressing that it isn't anymore. But I don't know. I feel like a How I Met Your Mother kind of situation would work really well for a story like this. Obviously, they're totally different. I'm not saying that it should be exactly the same, but I feel like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if it's not going to be a straightforward rom-com movie that has a clean, wrapped up ending, I feel like there was space for a lot more development and more mess. Because it just felt really weird to me. Like, it felt like the show kind of simultaneously felt like it was just rushing through the timeline to get these two to be like, oh, these two are so in love. But then also by the end of the first season, by the end of the 10 episodes, I felt like the conclusion, the climax, like, wasn't all that dramatic. Like, it didn't feel like there were a ton of stakes at the end of the day. And I think another contributing factor to that is my other main criticism of the show is that the two leads are like very like cool girl coded. They both seem almost like unrealistically perfect and so understanding and empathetic in their relationship with each other. All of the conflict comes from external sources like this, oh, the world doesn't want us to be together, but they're so like perfect that it's almost kind of hard to root for them. Maybe I'm just fucking crazy. I don't know, but I just felt like there wasn't enough drama. There wasn't enough mess. I'm here to be entertained, you know? I want you to show me at your worst. And Kristen Bell's character, yes, she gets a little bit vulnerable and like a little bit like, you know, insecure, but then she's just so upfront and open about it. And like, they like talk it out within 5 minutes. And it's like, okay, I never really felt like there was any risk here at all, which I don't know, just as a viewer, I feel like I want a little bit more like from an entertainment standpoint. I don't know, I feel like it means something to see characters like make mistakes and like figure it out. And the characters make mistakes. They just feel like so low stakes mistakes that it doesn't even really feel all that important. I mean, even the conflict that she had with her sister, I just felt like wrapped up so quickly and easily. Like, that has not been my experience. But like, I think a good byproduct of this is that I'm really invested in the side characters. I'm incredibly invested in Sasha and Morgan and Esther, Sasha's wife, and her relationship with her daughter and her mother-in-law. Incredibly fascinating to me. Even Rebecca, like the hot rabbi's ex. Like, I'm very invested in them. So I'm very hopeful. I'm excited to see more. It was really fun. But yeah, I do think that this is like, it feels a little bit weird to me because of the modern, like the streaming age. It just feels like it's kind of trying to be a lot of things instead of committing to being one thing. Overall though, definitely recommend. If you like rom-coms, I think you'll love it. You know why Spider-Man and Batman are two of the most popular comic book characters of all time? It's because they get bitches. And when they're not getting bitches, they're thinking about getting bitches, okay? It is crazy to me that so many people have this perception of like, comic book movies and comic books are for boys. They're like lame punch, pow, pow stories. No, they are melodramas. They are melodramas. They are love triangles and mess. And the best comic book movies understand this. Like, I have my qualms with the Raimi Spider-Man movies, but at least that man understood that Peter is the most down bad comic book character, like, of all time, okay? The reason why the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies work so well, in my opinion, is because there is such a huge emphasis on the romance, and the love interest is like so well written and believable, and that is a huge part of Spider-Man comics. Even the comic book characters that you think of as like the most stoic and badass, like Daredevil and Batman and Wolverine, like their entire stories are about how damaged they are and how broken they are and how desperately they want to be loved, and that is why their love interests are so important. And obviously, I'm not saying that romance is the only or most important element of these stories, but I'm saying that it is a huge factor in what makes these stories enduring and entertaining for literally decades, because you cannot have characters that are just punching their way out of every situation and expect audiences to care for literally decades. And I feel like the confusion here is because when the MCU first started, they utilized a much more standard like action movie format that is supposed to appeal to a generally male audience, that James Bond type thing of like a singular male hero who has a call to action and has to go on an adventure. And then there is like a little bit of like romance sprinkled in, but it's mainly so that there can be a female eye candy character and there's not a lot of time given to it. But by the time they started doing more crossover storytelling and having all these characters into movies, and they fleshed out their like first real romance, which in my opinion is Wanda and Vision. Like that was the first romance that they actually gave a significant amount of the story time to. You could argue Tony and Pepper, but I feel like Pepper was always such a secondary character that it doesn't feel like it had the same weight. And that's why I think the introduction of Disney Plus was so pivotal in the rise and fall and maybe rise again of the MCU, because when they introduced shows, long form storytelling, specifically romance focused with WandaVision and Loki, it was like the peak of general interest in the MCU. Everyone was talking about those shows, and it's because you were able to give this like real character development about human stories, not about them attacking bigger and bigger threats. It was actually humanizing these characters. But then we got oversaturated and we started trying to introduce new characters, and the focus stopped being about expanding the humanity of these characters, and it started being about introducing new characters and appealing to comic book fans who want to point and look and say, oh wow. And that's why Agatha All Along feels like a real, genuine return to form, because it's fun and silly, and there are a surprising amount of like cosmic and magical elements in the Marvel comic book world. It's not just superheroes. There's a lot of like that mysticism as well, which is really fun. But there is just also a lot of melodrama and human-based stories, and I think that is what is so appealing about Agatha and why the show has me completely hooked for the first time in I don't know how long with Marvel. So anyways, in conclusion, let Marvel characters kiss, please. And I don't mean to be dramatic. I do have a natural talent for it, but that's not what I'm trying to do here. It is not hyperbole when I tell you that this movie is so catastrophically awful. It is so painfully dull and joyless that it is actually kind of impressive. I saw Joker Folie à Deux last night for you guys, okay? That's how much I care about you. That's how committed I am. I have an insatiable work ethic, just ask anyone who knows me. And despite the fact that I did find it kind of rock and roll that Todd Phillips went into this movie with seemingly the express intention of pissing off and alienating all of the fans of the original Joker, I kind of knew that I was probably not gonna love it. However, it genuinely surprised me with how thoroughly disappointing it was in every single regard. It breaks every potential promise it could make to any potential audience member. And part of that does seem to be intentional, because it seems like Todd Phillips was kind of desperate to walk back everything that the first film set up, but it also fails to follow through on the promise of being a bright and bombastic movie musical starring Lady Gaga. Like, I don't know why you would tell us that that's what it is when you are so clearly resentful of movie musicals. And listen, I get it. I know that musicals are a hard sell for modern audiences. They are not my favorite genre. But if you appreciate the film and the history of film even a little bit, you have got to understand that some of the greatest films ever made are movie musicals. And I don't understand why you would even try to make a film like this if you seemingly hate the genre so much. Not only are there no like major song set pieces, but the vast majority of the songs are sung by quietly mumbling while a character looks out of a green-toned window. Like, I cannot stress enough how just boring this movie is. As a rule, I never walk out of movies. I think that if I'm going to be critical of a film or even shit talk it, like, I owe it to the film and the artists who made it to sit through the entire runtime. That's the least I can do. And I did not walk out of this movie, but I do feel like every second that I sat there, I grew more resentful of the time that it was taking from me. That's how painful this film was to watch. And ultimately, films are really hard to make, okay? I understand that it's a gamble every time an artist makes a film. And especially going into a film like this with as much baggage as Todd Phillips seemed to have, like, I sympathize. I really do. I'm not trying to be intensely negative, but ultimately I just don't think this film had anything particularly interesting or poignant or relevant to say. It sucks that Lady Gaga was so completely wasted in this film. Like, it's Lady Gaga and she's supposed to be playing Harley fucking Quinn and we got Lee. But it also just sucks to yet again have a story where there is one female character and she is grossly underwritten to serve as the delusion fuel for the male character. Like, I don't care if that's by design. I don't care if it's supposed to illustrate something about Arthur or society or men. Like, you can tell stories that are critical of all of those things without cutting women from your narrative entirely. And it just feels like Lee was not a real character. She was a fucking fantasy, and I'm gonna stop ranting. I didn't like it. I don't think many people are gonna like it. I honestly wouldn't waste your time, but to each their own. Okay, fuck it. It turns out I have more to say about this movie because the fragility of the male ego in the defense of this movie on the internet right now is just tickling me, okay? Because what they're saying now is that if you didn't like this movie, it's because you are incapable of feeling empathy for Arthur. You did not like seeing him humanized. You just wanted to see the Joker go on a little murderous killing spree and dance for you like the little monkey that you think it is. You must not like intellectual and emotional storytelling. That must be what it is. And I wish I was joking because that's so fucking absurd, but I'm not. I'm being 100% serious. And here's the thing about this movie, okay? This commentary, this like backlash to the backlash has given me a whole new perspective because I originally like walked out of this thinking, I feel like Todd Phillips was like trying to subvert, trying to walk back a lot of the themes of the first movie, like out of resentment for how openly incels embraced the first movie. But upon thinking about it further, I think this movie might actually double down. I think this movie might actually be more incel coded than the first one, which is impressive. And you know what? We're just gonna talk openly about spoilers. I don't know if you care, but you have been warned. The biggest reason for this, I think, is the introduction of Harley Quinn, who we all know by now is not actually Harley Quinn. She goes by Lee, and every single facet of this character's identity has been stripped away. She no longer has her education or her background or her personality, but one of the biggest elements of her origin is that she is no longer the Joker's victim, okay? This narcissistic abuser is no longer abusing her, she's abusing him. She rejects him when he shows her his humanity because she doesn't want an emotional beta cuck boyfriend, okay? This is just like what textually happens on screen. And if you're wondering what her reasoning is, she doesn't get any. She doesn't get a backstory, of course. This movie is not like working to tear down this badass idealized version of the Joker that people think the first movie set up. That was never who Arthur was in the first movie. He was someone that incels could see themselves in because they see themselves as perpetual victims. When this movie shows police violence, it isn't gonna make audiences think that, oh, police violence is bad. They're gonna think it's bad when it happens to me, which is why all of the victims in this movie of police violence are white. Like, of course this movie would turn Harley Quinn into the real abuser in this relationship because, as we all know, women hold all the power in society and men are just their misunderstood victims. Obviously. Listen, I honestly respect people who are trying to intellectualize and pontificate about how people just didn't get it, how this movie is deeply misunderstood and the messaging is actually beautiful. I know, baby. I know that game. I do it all the fucking time. But let's be real. Art criticism is not a debate. And you can wax poetic about how the themes of this movie are brilliant. I don't think they are, but people are entitled to that opinion all they want. But at the end of the day, art is about how it affects people. And it's not affecting people well in this case, okay? It's just not. Not critics, not audiences. And I also just think it's a little weird to conflate a film's quality with its themes, because you can have the best of intentions with a story, okay? You can be trying to say something incredibly poignant. You can be like trying to make a piece of work that doubles as art and activism, and it can still be not put together well, okay? And even if I thought that the themes of this movie were good and brilliant and important, I would still think that it's incredibly boring, and not because it's a musical and not because it's a courtroom drama. If you think that this is a particularly good courtroom drama, I really do think that you should maybe watch more movies. I mean, I'm glad you enjoyed it, but that's just genuinely how I feel. Anyways, all of that also exists within the context of the fact that this movie was given a $200 million budget and was never asked to screen test for an audience before release. Not once did they have to do screen testing. Batgirl, which tested well, was shelved and we'll never see it again for a tax write-off. Coyote vs. Acme, which allegedly tested amazingly, was also shelved. So, I don't know. Maybe it's karma. So, the Donald Trump villain origin story movie, The Apprentice, starring Sebastian Stan and Jeremy Strong, is finally coming out this weekend. And I am surprised that there's not already more of an outcry, because this movie does not hold back. I saw this at Fantastic Fest. It was one of the secret screenings. It's one of 2 Sebastian Stan movies that are in theaters right now that I saw there. And honestly, I went into this movie thinking, I don't really feel like spending any time even with someone pretending to be Donald Trump. And what could they possibly do to make me hate this man more than I already do? Well, let me tell you, I do think that this is a very well-told story. I think that the film is paced extremely well, and I think the characterization of everyone here is fascinating to watch, if incredibly disturbing. And I gotta say, when I tell you this movie does not hold back, initially I thought that it was too complimentary of them to be hiring someone as good-looking as Sebastian Stan to be playing this man. But first of all, Sebastian Stan is such a crazy good actor. I was literally like dumbfounded in the theater with how excellently Sebastian Stan is able to mimic his exact mannerisms and the inflections of his speaking. Like, it is not a caricature of Donald Trump. He like truly embodied the way he moves and speaks, and it was genuinely disturbing at times, especially because like this film really embraces how disgusting and pathetic and truly evil this man is, and how many crimes he's committed throughout his life. And I don't know, I walked into this movie thinking, is this even really necessary? And I walked out thinking, maybe kind of yeah, because from a historical standpoint, this man was president of the United States and is running again. And it really cannot be understated how much cheating and lying and betrayal and moral depravity and legal depravity this man has gotten into in his entire life. Like, he is a truly despicable human being, and I do feel like this movie accurately depicts that. And I also do think it's just a very entertaining and well-made movie. I will say also, the other Sebastian Stan movie that's in theaters right now has been out for a while. It's kind of hard to find. It seems to have a pretty limited release, but A Different Man is one of my favorite movies of the year. This is the movie starring Adam Pearson, who has these like facial differences, and the movie is about a man who previously looked like this and gets a procedure to no longer look like this. And this movie is, I fucking love it. It's hard to describe. It's like a dark comedy, paranoid thriller, but I also found it weirdly optimistic. It was really beautiful and moving and hilarious. It also stars Renate Reinsve, the Norwegian actress from Worst Person in the World, and I absolutely love her. She's amazing in this. Aaron Schimberg, the writer and director of this, this makes me want to seek out his other work. Like, the comedic tone of this movie is so precisely my style. It reminds me of like the almost surrealism of like early Coen Brothers movies. It's got this like very dry sense of humor that just almost kind of like makes you questioning if it's supposed to be a joke or not. I just loved it. I found it very introspective, and I found it weirdly optimistic. I think it's so beautiful. I think it's one of the most unique films I've seen in years, and I definitely recommend. So basically it's a good time to be a Sebastian Stan fan, I guess. Yeah, check these movies out.
In Friends, so many of Rachel's boyfriends would have been better for her to end up with than Ross, but I think Tag is really my favorite, and I know a lot of people don't like Tag for multiple reasons, one of them being that he's so much younger than Rachel, but I actually think that that's a really large part of the reason why he's so much better for Rachel, because Tag is a guy who actually settles down, who actually wants to be with the woman that he's dating, who actually really likes women overall, and that's not something that Rachel tends to find. And when she finds a man who likes women, she finds more of a Paolo type character, where Paolo just treats her like garbage and cheats on her all the time and expects it to be totally okay because he's Italian, which is so ridiculous and so stupid. And he actually assaults Phoebe, and it's very, very gross. And Rachel's like, nah, gross, leave, basically. But the thing is Tag genuinely not only likes Rachel, but likes being around her friend group. He likes hanging out with her. He doesn't mind that all of her friends are so much older than he is. He and her have very similar thought processes and mindsets when it comes to life and when it comes to like how beautiful they both are, because my God, was Tag one of the most beautiful characters on all of Friends. But I really think that Tag overall, if it had been his child, would have been so there so in, so down to be a dad, to be like the baby daddy of this character, to end up with Rachel, to like actually be together with her because he liked her, because he loved her, because they like worked well together. And I would have loved to see it being like, I am a Tag Defender. I really like that actor and everything I've seen him in, and I would have just loved if he had been a character who stayed on for the next 6 seasons, or however many seasons more we got of the show, to have him and Rachel be a couple. And maybe they don't always work out, maybe they don't always stay in the picture together, but I even think it would have been interesting to see him be a father to Emma, or a stepfather to Emma, and have that. And I feel like it could have worked. I feel like it could have worked so much better. Okay, thanks, bye. The thing about Cam from Modern Family is that there's literally an entire episode of Modern Family where Mitchell is just trying to bring Lily and Manny to a puppet show that he really enjoyed as a child. And from the beginning, from the moment that Mitchell is trying to explain why he likes this puppet show, Cam makes it about him, okay? Cam goes, well, I grew up, because Mitchell is saying how this was like his favorite thing in his childhood and it was so fancy and lovely, and Cam goes, well, I grew up next to the largest water slide in Missouri, which is the 3rd largest water slide in the United States of America. And is like immediately trying to make this story about him, even though Mitchell's just trying to describe why he likes the freaking puppet show that he wants to take his daughter to so that they can enjoy it together. Right? And then for the entire episode, Cam is actively trying not to go to the puppet show by pretending to be a good person. And Mitchell is getting rightfully mad at this scenario, okay? Cam sees that their gardener is crying. Cam does not know this man's name. Cam does not speak this man's language. Cam cannot understand this man, and Cam invites this man into their house so that they cannot go to the puppet show because Cam needs to be in the drama, in the scene, in the sphere. And he keeps saying that Mitchell is selfish for not wanting to help this man, this poor man. He could be going through, names a bunch of different tragedies that this man could be going through, but Cam has no idea because Cam does not speak this man's language. So Cam is just allowing this man to lock himself in their bathroom while not speaking his language. And Mitchell's going, I just want to go to the puppet show. I want to go to the puppet show. And Cam is going, I can't believe that you think a puppet show is more important than our dear friend's something. And Mitchell is like, we don't know him. And Cam just keeps letting the scenario get bigger and bigger and bigger until Mitchell finally decides to go to the puppet show alone, because that's the only way that he's going to get to go to the puppet show. And so he goes to pick up Manny from Jay's house, and Jay is like, oh, Manny doesn't want to go to the puppet show, like it's puppets. So Mitch tries to explain to his father the situation, the scenario, and he's like, Cam's just being too nice to people because he can't put it into words. He can't put it into the actual words, which is that Cam only decides to be nice to people and to be good to people when he doesn't want to do something else, and instead of looking like the bad guy, wants to find a way to look like the best person in the situation that he is causing because he is an asshat and an abuser. This is actually an abusive thing. This is a technique that abusers use all the time. And Jay basically tells Mitchell that he's super lucky to have Cam, and Mitchell goes back to Cam and is like, I'm so sorry, this is all my fault, I can't believe I did all this over a puppet show. And it's like, Mitchell, you did not actually do anything wrong. Cam was actively using abuser techniques to keep you from the thing that would bring you joy. But we normalize it through media. Okay, thanks. A really great trait for abusers is that they pretend to be completely incompetent and they pretend to be very silly and stupid, depending on the abuser. My abuser did not pretend to be silly and stupid. They pretended to be very competent in everything that they did and just very charismatic and cool and great. But abusers also tend to pretend to be very incompetent and seem like they're trying so hard for their spouse, and they just do everything that they can to gaslight their spouse instead of doing the things that they actually need to do, because it takes in some ways less effort to make someone seem crazy than to actually do the thing that's being asked of them. Here's the full conversation. 1 second. Okay, so this person said that Phil gets so much hate, but he was never as bad as Cam. And comparing and contrasting people who both have abusive tendencies isn't okay. This is a TV show, and we are talking about a TV show, but it's still something that people will often do to try and compare, like, the bad things that someone else did to downplay the bad things that a person is doing at that exact moment. We're not going to do that. So then this person says, nah, Phil was all around toxic and he loved to manipulate a situation to make it seem like Claire was insane, paranoid, and evil. And then this person's response is that Phil isn't smart enough for that. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. You do not have to be super duper intelligent to gaslight someone. You don't. And Phil actually has proven to be very competent at gaslighting people, which is a thing that he does in many, many episodes. But I'm once again going to bring up the carriage episode, the cart episode, in the grocery store, where Phil pushes Claire over with a grocery store cart, and then acts like it was her fault for falling. And for the entire rest of the episode, he just goes, oh, Claire, you're so silly. You always have to be right. You always have to be right. Okay, you can be right, sweetie. You be right. I'm wrong. You be right. When she was, in fact, right. She was, in fact, correct. So the entire episode, he's making her seem crazier and crazier and crazier because he's taking away the fact that he actually did physically harm her. And he turned all of their children against her. And he turned most of her family against her, to the point that she seemed crazy for trying to get the actual footage of the thing that happened. And that's the type of stuff that abusers do. That's the type of stuff that abusers do. I once got hit in a car, and my abuser made me think it was my fault. Made me legitimately believe it was my fault for getting hit, for getting harmed. So he is smart enough. And yes, I have seen Kevin Kneff himself. I have seen Kevin Kneff himself, but he's smart enough, guys. Abusers are smart enough to do these things. They pretend to be incompetent as an abuse tactic.
What I find most interesting about Blink Twice is how many people try to tell me what the point of the film was, okay? So here's the thing. I liked the movie. I thought the movie was a well-done work of art. I just said that the trigger warning needed to be more. That if the trigger warning were not going to be more, that it would be dangerous to a lot of people. And other people have therefore decided to tell me things like this, that the movie's a warning for young women. But interestingly enough, a lot of people are trying to tell me that the movie is actually a warning for men, because women already know what's up in the world. And then even more people are just trying to tell me that it's a mirror to society, which all of these things can be true. But none of them actually give me a reason as to why the trigger warning shouldn't have been more. Because here's the thing. If let's say Frida got out of that and didn't become the CEO of Channing Tatum's company, if she just got out of that situation and was able to go back and live her own life while remembering these things, or even while not remembering these things, and then saw this movie, like, if she just went, like, if Frida goes back out into the world, either remembering everything from the island or not remembering everything from the island, and decides that she's going to go see a movie, and that movie is Blink Twice, and this movie, again, the biggest part here that I keep saying is that the trigger warning does a very bad job of warning us of what's going on in the movie, because it wants to give it as a plot twist, and the plot twist is dangerous to people. Frida would go into this film and she would read that there's sexual violence in the film. And every movie has sexual violence, so she won't think much of it. And let's say she remembers. And she knows what her trigger warnings will be. She'll think, I've been through the worst of it. It's fine. I am totally okay going into this. And then she will watch the movie. And then the plot twist will happen. And when the plot twist happens, and when Frida has to see what happens in the movie and be reminded of what happened to her, because the movie did such a bad job of giving her a warning, she will have a panic attack. She will feel sick for days. She will not be able to sleep. She will have nightmares. So many people have told me all the ways that this movie could have broken them if I didn't warn them about the trigger warning. But there are still people who try to tell me that this is a warning to society. And you know what? sometimes warnings to society still need to have trigger warnings, because this is a dangerous film. I did not say it was bad. I did not say it did not have a message. I did not say it was not trying to warn us about people like Diddy, people like that poor French woman's husband. I did not say that. What I did say, and what I think is very important to hear with your ears, because I see on your profile that you are 19 years old. I'm 29, got a decade on you. Is that just because something's trying to warn you doesn't mean it does a good job. Because if people did not have the whole Diddy thing come out right now, if people did not have the whole French woman thing come out right now, if everyone just kept saying, oh, it's Epstein's Island, it's Epstein's Island. Epstein's Island already happened. So why couldn't we get a trigger warning for it? For the people who had to go there, for the people who had to live there, for the people who had to be a part of that. Why do you think it's okay to want to hurt the people who are victims in this because you don't think a trigger warning is necessary? Because again, my entire point on every video I've made on this is that the trigger warning needed to be more. It needed to state that there is graphic sexual violence, depictions of graphic sexual violence. It needed to give a warning. A warning to the victims who have already suffered through things was deserved in a case like this, where the plot twist was quite literally just sexual assault over and over and over again. And then the mockery of people, because it felt like a mockery. It did. It felt like a bit of a mockery at some points. And I think it was very well done and very interesting and very well written and very well directed. But that being said, it felt like a mockery to people who constantly have to wonder what they can't remember about their past trauma. Because I know a lot of people, myself included, who really constantly wonder what they can't remember about their past trauma. And that is not something people even know is a trigger they can have until a movie like this comes out. The audience deserved more warning. That's my point. And if you don't understand why that is an important point, then I worry.
Guys, I am in a slump, okay? I am in a reading slump, and I'm in the kind of reading slump where I can, read things. I can read things. I just finished a book, but I didn't enjoy it, and I didn't enjoy it not because it was bad. It was a very well-written book. It had the kind of storyline I like. It had the kind of writing I like. It had the types of characters that I adore. It was very Logan Huntzberger and Rory Gilmore kind of falling in love. It was giving Emily Wilde vibes, and I couldn't enjoy it the entire way through because I was just like, this is bleh. It's bleh. And it's not because the book was bleh, it's because my mind is bleh. So I need a book that will pull me out of a reading slump. Now here is the thing, when I need a book that can pull me out of a reading slump, it has to be a really specific kind of book. I'm a mood reader, terrible, curse on my house, but when I'm reading in a reading slump, I need a book that will pull me out of a reading slump. But in case it doesn't pull me out of a reading slump, I need it to be I know a lot of people, when they have reading slumps, are I need a book that's 5 stars so it'll pull me out. No, I don't need a 5-star book. I need a really shitty style, fun 3-star book. Okay, do you understand? Do you understand what I'm saying when I say this? It cannot be the 5-star year of the read for me. That'll actually break me if I can't enjoy it while I'm reading it because my brain is going, bleh. My brain feels like mildly hardened Play-Doh, if that makes any sense. When I'm trying to enjoy anything right now, mildly hardened Play-Doh. Sometimes goes a little soft, sometimes goes a little curvy or molded, and then starts getting stale again. So I need something that can work with the mildly hardened, sometimes softened Play-Doh to start bringing me back into reading. Okay? Because to be able to write, you have to be able to read. And to be able to read, you have to be able, well, not really, but I need to be able to write. And to be able to write, I have to be able to read. And I also need to be able to read because I enjoy reading. So help me. Please help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope. So, bye.
Haley and Dylan in Modern Family really are, to an extent, the healthiest relationship on that show, which is a crazy thing to say because they break up and they get back together so many times. But they break up and they get back together so many times because they're so drawn to each other as people, because they found each other when she was 14 and he was 17, and that was not the right time for them. And Haley needed to explore life more, and Dylan didn't really need to explore life more, but he did explore life more, and he found so many different things, including but not limited to, he married a doctor at one point and became the stepdad to like 2 kids who we don't see that much after. He breaks up with the doctor, but we do see every now and then because he does still consider himself a part of their lives, because he did like help to raise them for a couple of years and he did really love them. And the doctor who married him loved him too, and you can tell because she trusted him enough to be with her kids once they were divorced, and that's like not an easy thing for people to do. And the thing is, and then there's Haley, who's like dating all these men. She's dating older men, she's dating younger men, she's not really dating younger men, she's mostly dating older men. She's dating Adam Devine, and with Adam Devine, everyone always says that Andy's like the healthiest relationship for her, and no. And the reason no is because he treats her like a mistress, and he is the kind of person who really actively always thinks that Haley can do better and be better, and expects her to do and be better at all times. He's expecting so much more from her than sometimes she even wants to expect from herself, and he's not particularly nice to her. And again, he treats her like a mistress. He continuously refuses to break up with the woman who actively cheats on him continuously. And then instead of like resolving that problem and breaking up with the woman because he wants to be with Haley, he just decides that he's going to ignore Haley, and then he decides that he'll like sleep with Haley and he'll tell his girlfriend later, and then his girlfriend shows up, and then that becomes an entirely different thing. And all the while, Haley is just left to feel like a piece of garbage, but it's Andy who's actually doing these things. Haley doesn't want to be a part of this. Andy has choices in this situation and keeps pretending that he doesn't so that he can string her along. And then we get our Arvine. Is that his name? Arvine? The professor who was Alex's teacher, who then ends up with Alex in the end, which is a creepy, weird thing. A very creepy, weird thing. And Arvine didn't like Haley that much either. Like, he thought he liked her, but he was also expecting more from her. You know who never expected more from Haley because he thought Haley was already the best version of herself? Dylan. You know who, even while not expecting more from Haley, pushed her to follow her dreams? Dylan. You know who was super duper happy when he and Haley ended up having babies? Dylan. You know who's a really good father? Dylan. You know who's a really good mom? Haley. And you know who had no faith in either of them the entire show? No one. Not a single person. And they made it work. And they made it work really well. And Haley gets better jobs because she's with Dylan and she can be happy. And he takes care of the kids. And he's a nurse, so he actually already gets paid pretty well. And they work together so well because they have the one thing that Haley never had in any of her other relationships except with Rain or Shine. I will say, except with Rain or Shine, who really did appreciate her as a person but was trying to move faster than she was ready to move. Mutual respect, agency, choices, the belief that they were already good enough. Even if they wanted to get better, they would still encourage each other to be better and get better, but they were never expecting that as a caveat to their relationship. And that's why Dylan and Haley are the best couple in the show, and I love them so much. And I never liked Dylan in the earlier seasons, but when he comes back later, I'm like, yeah, he loves her. He likes her. And I think the bigger part here is that he likes her. He likes her as a human being. And that's so magical and so unheard of in Haley's life. Okay, anyways, bye.
Weaponized compassion is a thing, and it's a really dangerous thing that I think people so constantly forget about, especially because with these shows like sitcoms and Modern Family, where Cam is constantly doing like this great big thing and he's making it such a grand gesture and he's supposed to seem like the good guy in that moment, even though he's doing all of this to try and ruin Mitchell's day, and you can't prove it because it just seems like he's being a good person. I was raised by a narcissist, okay? I was raised by a narcissist. My abuser was a narcissist, and my abuser used to tell me constantly on repeat that they had to think about when they were going to be a good person. They had to really consider it. They had to do everything possible to force themselves to do the good thing, the right thing, the kind thing. And so because of that, I started noticing the pattern of when they were doing the right, good, kind thing. And it was never for the family that they actively chose and helped to raise and were a part of. It was always for strangers. And why was it so often for strangers? It wasn't because they wanted to help strangers. It was for two reasons. One, to brag to other people and have a story just in their pocket for a later date, usually 5 minutes after, to prove to other people that they're a good, selfless person. And two, to ruin somebody else's day. To ruin somebody that they cared about's day. That happened all the time, so often. And the only one that I can really think of at this exact moment, at this exact time, is when I was 11 years old and on my way to my first day at horse riding camp, and I was so excited and I was so happy and I was just ready for it. And the person in front of us hit a deer. And my abuser and my parents decided that we were going to stop at the side of the road to help this deer, which was dying. They called one of their buddies who's a hunter to come collect this deer. That I had to help with collecting the deer. I had to watch the deer physically die before going to horse camp for the day. And it seemed like this person was doing a good, great thing, helping the deer, helping to make sure that the deer gets taken care of. Never saw them do it again. Never saw them do anything like it again. It's Connecticut. It's New England. Do you know how many deer go by the road all the time? Do you know how many deer unfortunately get hit at all times? And do you know how often they just drive by them? Never saw them do it again. But on my first day of horse camp where I was so excited, I never saw them do it again, but on my first day of horse camp where I was so excited and so happy and so ready, we had to help the dead deer. And I had to watch the dead deer. And I was forced to keep my eyes on the deer as it died, because we had to really give its life meaning in that moment. And there were other times. There were smaller events, bigger events, where it just became a thing, where you weren't allowed to be the center of attention. They had to be the center of attention by helping someone else, because they couldn't be the center of attention by paying attention to you. They had to be the center of attention by helping somebody else. And by helping somebody else, they seemed like a really good person. And because they seemed like a really good person, you couldn't complain. And that's what Cam does in Modern Family all the time. It's also what Phil does in Modern Family all the time. Gloria doesn't do it as much, actually. But, like, Gloria has other moments like that. And yeah, it's a sitcom. And yeah, it's a trope. But media is a mirror to society, and this is something we should look at and pay attention to, because these are great ways to spot the signs for the dangers of being around a narcissist.